Columns that are part of moment frames are often taken to be difficult to assess because their effective length is harder to determine. In this example, we will determine the effective lengths and consequently the compressive strength of each of columns AB and BC to check whether or not they are adequate to support the given gravity loads. Notice that the column is fixed at the bottom and that all members are being bent about their strong axis, and thus we are using IX for all. This structure would look something like this in real life. When modeling it in a finite element program, make sure that you model the right end conditions and not release the ends in this case. Moreover, make sure to orient the columns and beams such that they bend about their strong axis in the given plane as shown. In a real problem, we would use the finite element model and apply the respective gravity dead and live loads for our application if known. If not known, we would extract the best suitable loads from AISC-7 and conduct an analysis afterwards to determine the highest combined axial load in each of the columns. However, in this problem, we would be focusing on the middle column only, and the gravity loads in each of the columns have already been determined. Let's start by checking column BC. In case the column and girder properties are not known, refer to the AISC manual Table 2-4 for the material properties, and Table 1-1 for the geometrical properties of W sections. We can determine the ultimate combined load on column BC by using the load combination from AISCE Chapter 2 that generates the highest load, and thus we end up with a compressive load of 250 kips. Afterwards, we need to determine the effective length of column BC. By referring to AISC specifications commentary, equation C-A-7-3, we can determine G at the top of the column as well as at the bottom of the column. This will give us the following value for G top and the following value for G bottom. We can then use these G values to determine the length factor K by using figure C-A-7.2 from the AISC specifications commentary. So we connect G top to G bottom with a straight line. The intersection point in the middle will be the value K. It is around 1.45 but will be rounded up to 1.5, which is more conservative. Now that we have K, we can determine the effective length KL. Because the column strength tables 4-1A in the AISC manual use the effective length with respect to bending about the weak axis Y only, we have to convert the effective length in X to that of Y by dividing the effective length in X by the ratio of radii of gyration taken from the bottom of the table. This gives us an effective length of 8.6 feet, and we will use 9 feet as a conservative value. Now we look at the table and extract the compressive strength for the right column size W14 by 82 with an effective length of 9 feet and end up with 940 kips. This is of course greater than 250 kips, and thus column BC is adequate. Now let's check column AB, which have higher loads but the same size as BC. Again, we use Chapter 2 from AISCE-7 to calculate the ultimate compressive load. We again calculate the values of G at the top and bottom of the column. At the top it is straightforward and it is calculated as follows. At the bottom, however, because the support is fixed, we take the value of 1 as suggested by AISC specification, commentary Appendix 7, Section 7.2. Using these values, we end up with K being 1.4. Again, we convert KLX to KLY and extract the compressive strength from the table, which ends up being 968 kips, which is larger than 600 kips, and thus column AB is also adequate. What happens if we have the same problem with only one difference? and that is, the column is pinned rather than fixed. Well, then this means that nothing changed when it comes to column BC, but for column AB, while G remains the same at the top of the column, G will be 10 at the bottom of the column because it is pinned. This means that K will have the value of 2. This makes KL for column AB 12 feet, and thus the strength will be 844 kips, and thus the column remains adequate. Do notice, however, that the compressive strength is noticeably lower than that with a fixed end support, and thus please take caution when modeling member end conditions and understand the influence of your engineering choices. In this example, we will learn to evaluate the strength of compressive members comprised of double angle sections that are connected to each other using pre-tension bolts or welds. We will see how the connector spacing plays a role in the overall member strength and how do we determine the right spacing. In this example, we have a long leg back-to-back double angle section. This means that the angles meet at their longer legs. Please note that we have a separation between the angles of 3/4 inches. To extract the material properties, as always, we refer to AISC Manual Table 2-4. And for the geometrical properties, we have to refer to Tables 1-7 and 1-15. Make sure to refer to the right sizes, especially in the double angles table 1-15, where there is a distinction between long leg back-to-back and short leg back-to-back. So we start by determining the ultimate compressive load. We then refer to table 4-9 to determine the compressive strength of the double angle section with respect to both axes of bending. Notice that this table is for a separation of 3/8 inches, while we have a separation of 3/4 inches. Because the ends are pinned, K is equal to 1. Let's start with bending about the x-axis. Here the effective length is 8 feet, and thus we can extract the compressive strength from the table as 127 kips. For the y-axis, the separation affects the bending stiffness of the double angle section, and thus the effective length should be adjusted by the ratios of radii of gyration. This gives us an effective length of 7.34 feet, which we take as 8 feet for a conservative approach. And the compressive strength about y-axis will then be 132 kips, which is greater than 120 kips as well. However, the strength in x-axis is less, and thus it governs. Notice that the tables also provide the minimum number of intermediate connectors required. Let's check whether 2 intermediate spacings are indeed adequate. We determine the spacing as follows, and thus we have a space of 32 inches. From AISC specifications, section E6.2, individual components of compression members composed of 2 or more shapes shall be connected to one another at intervals A, such that the slenderness ratio A/Ri of each of the component shapes between the fasteners does not exceed 3/4 times the governing slenderness ratio of the built-up member. The minimum radius of gyration Ri shall be used in computing the slenderness ratio of each component part. We can rearrange the inequality as follows, where Ri here is Rz. This inequality proves to be true, and thus 2 intermediate connectors is indeed sufficient, and the member is adequate for the applied loads. In the case where we do not have the respective double angle section in table 4-9 of the manual, we have to do the calculations ourselves. Let's start by determining whether the section has any slender elements. By referring to table B4.1a in the AISC specifications, we can determine the equations for the width to thickness ratios as well as the limiting width to thickness ratios. We then calculate them and find out that the width to thickness ratios does not exceed the limiting ratio, and thus there are no slender elements in the section. When there are no slender elements, the member will fail either due to flexural buckling or flexural torsional buckling because it is single symmetric. Let's start by looking at flexural buckling from AISC specification section E3. Here we can determine the elastic buckling stress. Note that we use the slenderness about the x-axis because it governs. The highest slenderness ratio should be used. Next, we have to check whether the column will buckle elastically or inelastically. Because the slenderness ratio is smaller than the limit, the member is inelastic, and we will use the following equation to determine the critical stress. To determine the critical stress in flexural torsional buckling, we have to refer to section E4-3. When it comes to built-up sections connected by pre-tensioned bolts or welds, the slenderness ratio about the axis of symmetry Y will have to be adjusted according to AISC specifications section E6. And because A over Ri is greater than 40, the modified slenderness ratio is 61, which is less than the limit 134 determined earlier, and thus the member will buckle inelastically. Now we use equations E4-3 to determine the critical stress using all the section constants we extracted from tables 1-7 and 1-15, as well as the material parameters from table 2-4. And we finally get a critical stress of 27.7 ksi. And because it is greater than the flexural buckling stress of 26.4 ksi, flexural buckling will govern. The final step is to calculate the nominal compressive strength, followed by the allowed compressive strength, which is greater than 120 kips, and thus the member is adequate. Again, we see that it's the same value we previously found by using table 4-9 from the AISC manual. So please make sure to use the tables whenever it is possible to save time and possibly avoid computational mistakes that are usually accompanying lengthy calculations. Don't forget to like and subscribe and turn on the notification bell. Thank you for watching.